In 1974, a retired schoolteacher in rural Ohio kept a handwritten list taped inside her kitchen cabinet. It had 9 meals on it. She rotated through them every week for 14 years. Her grocery bill never topped $8. When she died at 89, her daughter found the list and cried, not because the meals were sad, but because she recognized every single one from her childhood. Number 21 on this list costs less than $1. Number 9 was the only hot meal some men ate for months after their wives passed. And number 4 kept an entire generation alive through the worst economic collapse in American history. These are not recipes from cookbooks. These are meals that kept people breathing. Subscribe. Let us count down 25 meals your grandmother never wrote down because she never had to. They were in her hands. Number 25. Bread and warm milk. This was the meal at the bottom of the barrel. A few slices of bread torn into a bowl, warm milk poured over, a spoonful of sugar if you had it. That was supper. In the 1930s, families across the Midwest ate this 3 nights a week because there was nothing else. Seniors who grew up on it went back to it in their 70s, not out of nostalgia, but because it still worked. Soft, warm, no cooking, no cleanup beyond a bowl and a spoon. Nurses in assisted living facilities quietly report that residents who refuse the dining hall sometimes ask for exactly this. They are not being difficult, they are going home. Number 24. Fried bologna and eggs. A package of bologna cost 79 cents in 1983. A dozen eggs cost 60 cents. That was 10 meals for $1.40. Slice the bologna thick, score the edges. Fry it until dark and crispy. Crack an egg into the same pan. Serve it on white bread or eat it straight from the skillet. This was the widower's meal, the meal a man made when he had never learned to cook because his wife had done it for 40 years, and now she was gone. It required no recipe, no timing, no skill, just a skillet and 5 minutes. Number 23. Cornbread crumbled into cold buttermilk. In the rural South, this was supper. A square of leftover cornbread was broken into a tall glass of cold buttermilk and eaten with a long spoon. The cornbread softened into a cold, tangy porridge that was filling and strangely satisfying. Seniors in Alabama and Tennessee ate this on summer nights when the kitchen was too hot to cook. The cornbread was already made and the buttermilk cost nothing. Ready in 30 seconds. No dishes beyond a glass and a spoon. Number 22. Creamed chipped beef on toast. The military called it something unprintable. A jar of dried beef shredded into a white sauce of butter, flour and milk, poured over toast. 15 minutes, 1 pan. Millions of men learned this in the army during World War II and Korea, and they kept making it for the rest of their lives. It was the one recipe they carried home from the service. Widowers who could not boil water could make this because they had made it 1,000 times in a mess hall before they ever had a kitchen of their own. In certain corners of Pennsylvania and the Midwest, seniors still make it on Saturday mornings with the same jar and the same cast iron skillet they have used for 40 years. Number 21. Baked beans from a can with toast. A can of pork and beans cost 49 cents. A loaf of bread cost 89 cents. That was 6 meals for under $1.50. Open the can, pour it into a pot. Heat until it bubbles, toast on the side. That was dinner. For a senior with trembling hands or fading eyesight, the simplicity was everything. No measuring, no cutting, no raw ingredients to worry about. In church food pantries across America, canned pork and beans were the single most donated item for 30 years because every volunteer knew exactly who was going to eat them and exactly how. Alone, standing at the counter, straight from the pot. Number 20. Hamburger soup. 1 pound of the cheapest ground beef, 1 onion, 1 can of diced tomatoes, 2 potatoes, water and salt. Brown the beef. Add everything, and simmer for 30 minutes. This made a pot that lasted 4 days. The potatoes thickened the broth as they broke apart. The tomatoes gave it brightness that made a bowl look like real food. This was the meal church ladies brought in mason jars to homebound widows across the rural Midwest. It traveled well, it reheated perfectly, and it was sturdy enough that a person could eat it as a complete meal without needing anything else on the side. First pattern break. Here is the thing about cooking for one that nobody warns you about. It is not the cooking that breaks you, it is the quiet. The sound of a single fork on a plate. The refrigerator humming louder than it should because the kitchen used to be full of noise, and now it is not. These meals were designed to be made without energy, without motivation, without the reason that used to stand on the other side of that kitchen and say that smells good. When the reason is gone, you still need to eat. These meals understood that. They asked nothing of you except to stand long enough to stir a pot. Number 19. Stovetop macaroni and cheese, not the box kind with the orange powder. Elbow macaroni boiled, drained, then stirred with butter, milk, and as much shredded cheese as you could afford. The cheese melted into the hot pasta, and the butter turned it into a sauce without any technique. 12 minutes, less than $2. Grandmothers kept a block of sharp cheddar in the refrigerator at all times because this meal could appear with 15 minutes notice whenever a grandchild showed up. But on the nights when no one came, they made it for themselves. A smaller portion, the same pot. Number 18. Sardines on crackers. A tin of sardines cost $1.19. A sleeve of saltines cost 80 cents. 2 meals, no cooking, no refrigeration, no electricity. Sardines are packed with omega-3 fatty acids, calcium from the soft bones, and protein. Seniors who ate them regularly were doing more for their hearts than people spending $50 a month on supplements. Old men in fishing towns along the Gulf Coast ate these every afternoon. Not because they were poor, though many were. It was the meal that reminded them of their fathers, who ate the same thing on the same kind of afternoon. Number 17. Spam and fried rice. Dice the spam. Fry it until the edges are crisp. Add cold leftover rice and soy sauce. Scramble an egg through it. It takes 8 minutes. Hawaiian families, Filipino families, and Korean War veterans ate this without apology because they knew what the mainland refused to accept. Spam fried until crispy is one of the most satisfying proteins you can buy for $2. For a senior who served in Korea, this was not poverty food, it was the mess hall. The can sat in the cupboard for years, and when you needed it, it was there. Number 16. Homemade tomato soup. Not from a red and white can, but from a can of whole tomatoes, a knob of butter, and a splash of milk. Crush the tomatoes in the pot, add the butter and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid, simmer for 10 minutes, then stir in milk until the soup is creamy and pink. It tasted 3 times better than the canned version, and it cost the same. The butter rounded every sharp edge. The sugar was the difference between soup that tasted like a can and soup that tasted like a kitchen where someone cared. Number 15. Butter beans and ham hock. A bag of dried butter beans, a smoked ham hock, an onion, water, 4 hours of patience. The beans swelled and turned creamy. The ham hock gave up every ounce of smoky flavor until the bone was clean. A 1-pound bag cost $1 and produced enough stew to last 5 days. In the South, this meal was so common it had no name. You did not say, "I am making butter bean stew." You said, "I put some beans on." Everyone knew what that meant. A kitchen that smelled like a grandmother lived in it, whether one still did or not. Number 14. Corned beef hash. 1 can of corned beef. 2 potatoes. An onion. Fry the potatoes and onion until crispy, then crumble in the corned beef. Press it flat until the bottom turns golden. A can cost $1.75 and made 2 full meals. Seniors who served in the military or grew up during rationing did not consider this a downgrade. The British ate it during the war, and Americans ate it after. Diners across New England still serve it for breakfast, $6 a plate. Your grandfather made the same thing at home for pocket change. Second pattern break. Here is something the food industry does not want you to think about. These meals cost almost nothing because they use ingredients that grocery stores cannot mark up. Dried beans, potatoes, onions, rice, canned tomatoes. There is no advertising budget behind a head of cabbage. That is why you never see commercials for these meals. Instead, they sell frozen dinners at $4 each that contain less nutrition than a bowl of bean soup that costs 35 cents. The economics are not complicated, they are just cruel. Number 13. Kielbasa and potatoes. 1 ring of smoked kielbasa, 4 potatoes and 1 onion. Slice, dice and fry them together until the potatoes turn golden and the sausage edges are crisp. The smoked garlic and pork fat rendered into the potatoes and did all the seasoning. No spice rack required. Polish families in Pittsburgh and Chicago made this once a week for 100 years. The kielbasa kept in the refrigerator for weeks. The potatoes kept in the pantry for months. A senior who could not remember a full recipe could still make this from muscle memory. Number 12. Grits and butter with a fried egg. A bag of grits cost $1.50 and lasted a month. Boil water, stir in grits, drop a knob of butter on top, fry an egg. The yolk broke over the surface and turned everything golden. In the South, this was breakfast every morning for 50 years. It was not exciting, it was reliable. And at 75, reliable was worth more than exciting ever was. Number 11. Hobo stew. Ground beef, a can of mixed vegetables, a can of tomato soup, and a couple of diced potatoes. 1 pot, 30 minutes. The name came from the Depression, when men riding freight trains pooled whatever they had into a single cooking pot. The home version kept the spirit. You used whatever was in the pantry, corn 1 week, green beans the next. The tomato soup held it all together. You could not make it wrong, because there was no right way to make it. Number 10. Rice and gravy. A cup of rice. A couple of tablespoons of flour, browned in butter or drippings until dark. Add water, stir until thick, then pour it over the rice. That was it. In homes across the South, rice and gravy was the meal that meant the money was gone and payday was still a week away. For a senior on a fixed income, the last week of the month was rice and gravy week. Not because they wanted it, because the math demanded it. The meal asked for nothing, it delivered enough. That was the contract. Number 9. Hot dog stew. 3 hot dogs sliced into coins. A can of baked beans. A can of diced tomatoes. 1 pot. Simmer until hot. A package of hot dogs cost $1 and contained 8 francs. This was not a meal anyone bragged about. Nobody put it on a recipe card. But for a man sitting alone in a kitchen he did not understand, eating from his dead wife's pots because he did not own any, hot dog stew was the thing that kept him eating, the thing that kept the stove on. Third pattern break. Here is the truth. No one says at the doctor's office. When they ask a senior if they are eating well, the senior says yes. What they do not say is that dinner was a sleeve of crackers over the sink. That lunch was skipped. That breakfast was coffee and nothing because the thought of cooking for one person was so heavy they could not lift the pan. These meals exist for that weight, not to make it disappear, but to make it manageable. A pot of soup is not a cure for grief, but it is warm, and it is something a person can do for themselves when everything else feels impossible. Number 8. Chicken gizzard stew. A pound of gizzards cost less than $1. Simmer them an hour until tender. Add potatoes, a carrot and an onion and cook until the broth thickens. The flavor was pure, concentrated chicken, deeper than any breast or thigh. In black communities across the South, gizzards were everyday food. Seniors who grew up eating them never stopped. The protein was extraordinary. The iron was even better. Doctors never recommended them, because doctors rarely asked what their elderly patients actually ate. Number 7. Beef and barley soup. A pound of cheap stew meat, a cup of pearl barley, 1 onion, 1 carrot, and a stalk of celery. Brown the meat, add everything, then simmer for an hour. The barley swelled and turned the broth thick and creamy. This was the soup of Eastern European immigrants who knew how to stretch tough meat into a week of meals. It had one quality that mattered above all others. It got better every day. Day 1 was good. Day 2 was rich. Day 3 was the best thing in the refrigerator. A meal that improved with time was a meal designed for someone eating alone. Number 6. The fried egg sandwich. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, butter, and 90 seconds of cooking for less than 50 cents. The yolk broke when you bit in and soaked into the toast. For a senior who did not feel like cooking, this was the compromise between skipping dinner and standing at the stove for an hour. It took less time to make than it took to decide you were hungry. Number 5. Cabbage and ground beef pot. A pound of ground beef, half a head of cabbage, a can of tomato sauce. Brown the beef. Roughly chop the cabbage. Add the sauce and some water, cover and simmer for 20 minutes. It tasted like stuffed cabbage rolls without the 2 hours of rolling. A head of cabbage cost 60 cents. A single pot lasted 4 days. The leftovers were better than the first serving because the cabbage absorbed more of the tomato overnight. It filled the kitchen with a smell that made the house feel less empty. Number 4. Depression-era potato and egg scramble. 3 potatoes, 3 eggs, an onion, bacon grease. Fry the potatoes and onion until golden. Crack the eggs on top, then stir until set. It takes 20 minutes in a single skillet. Seniors who grew up during the Depression ate this without thinking about it. It was programmed in. A retired factory worker in Akron ate this 3 nights a week for over a decade after his wife died. When his son asked if he wanted help learning new recipes, the old man said, "This is what I know how to make, and this is what keeps me going." He lived to 93. Number 3. Biscuits and sausage gravy. A tube of biscuit dough, a roll of breakfast sausage, milk and flour. Brown the sausage, sprinkle flour, pour milk and stir until thick. Split the biscuits and pour the gravy. This was Sunday morning across the entire American South for 100 years. Men who could not cook anything else could make sausage gravy because it was the first thing their wives taught them on slow Saturday mornings. After their wives were gone, they made it alone and ate it standing at the counter. Not because they had to stand, but because sitting at the table alone was harder than the cooking. Number 2. Pork and beans with cornbread baked in the same skillet. A can of pork and beans simmered in a cast iron skillet until thick. They were scraped into a bowl. Cornbread batter was poured into the same hot skillet and baked 20 minutes. The cornbread picked up the faint sweetness from the beans. 2 foods, 1 pan, under $2. When a grown child suggested buying new cookware, the senior said no, not that skillet. It seasoned the food and the memories at the same time. Number 1. A pot of soup from whatever is left. No recipe, no list. A pot of water and whatever the kitchen still had. A chicken leg going grey, a bendy carrot, 2 potatoes with soft spots cut away, half an onion in foil, a handful of noodles from a bag open for months, salt and thyme. It never tasted the same twice, but every single time it was made. That was the point, not what it tasted like. The fact that a person, alone, tired, maybe hurting, still stood up, walked to the kitchen, filled a pot with water, and decided that tonight they were going to eat. That decision was the recipe. Everything else was just ingredients. Make one of these this week. Just one. Sit at the table, not the couch. Eat it slow. And if it tastes like a memory, that is because it is one. Share in the comments which one you are making. These meals were never about being cheap. They were proof that a pot, a stove, and the will to feed yourself is enough. It has always been enough.